Good evening, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. This is that D&D podcast, and we are back from a pretty long hiatus with another improbable interview. Before we introduce our special guest, let's go around and introduce ourselves. My name's Erin. She, her pronouns. I've been on most of these, and the hiccups are here. That's it. Zach.
Hello, Internet. I'm Zach. He, him pronouns. I too have been on a large percentage of these, and I'm really looking forward to asking some questions.
That's what I look forward to every day, asking some questions. I'm Renee. I am she, and I've been here a couple of times. I am more often behind the scenes these days, so yay!
Karen, since you are a special guest, why
Yes.
don't I open the floor to you to um, tell us all kinds of things about yourself before we dive into the interrogation process?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Hello. My name is Karen. She, her. I have too many gigs, and that's always stuck in my head. And like the too many cooks sound, like too many gigs,
Oh no.
slowly driving me crazy. Um, but one of them is improv, which has just become more and more of a like really exciting focus in my life. When I first took an improv class in 2008, and I've been gaming since like my very first Dungeons and Dragons game back in high school, which was a while ago. So just saw a lot of really amazing overlaps between it. Was like, oh man, this is so cool. Like I'm so excited that I can practice like all of these really good gaming applicable skills through this improv class. And as I kept kind of doing improv and I kept, of course, still gaming, I kept thinking about like, man, I wish more gamers would take improv classes because, and this was still very early on. Like there was talk about improv. I feel like not in the same way that people talk about it now in terms of just like how much we talk about how useful it is. But I still really wanted a class to happen. So that started happening. We started teaching classes like maybe 6 or 7 years ago now, I want to say, at starting locally in the Bay Area, and now just kind of at the conventions that I happen to be at, I try to also teach improv, teach an improv class. So it's been really great. And it's been really fun to try to make classes that are by gamers for gamers. And so we talk about improv just as it applies to gaming, so that people don't have to try to filter it out, like just what works for them. And then I wrote a book because I used to teach, and I would always write these very long, very detailed lesson plans because that's just kind of how I was. And so I wrote very long, very detailed lesson plans for teaching improv too, as one does.
Of course.
And people kind of kept asking for my notes, and I was like, "Oh God, no! You don't. This is a hot mess. You don't want this." And then I was kind of like, "But what if?" So I spent some time rewriting everything, basically, because at the time it was notes written to me as an improv instructor, and I wanted a book that was written to players who maybe had never done improv before at all and wanted to kind of teach themselves something, and wanted to try out some improv in like the privacy of their own living room. So that came out in November, and I'm just really excited about that being a thing now. Of course, as soon as I wrote it, there were like a million exercises that didn't get into it that I wish could have.
You gotta save some for the sequel, right?
Yeah, so I was going to say that's what volume 2 is for. Part 2.
Oh no! Oh God, no!
Improv Boogaloo.
That'd be awesome. I've thought about putting stuff up on the website, but I just haven't had time because one of my other side gigs, in addition to my day job, is that I do copy editing for games as well. So I do a lot if I'm not teaching or editing or actually doing the job that gives me health insurance. I'm like sleeping, maybe? That's about it.
I've heard of that. How is it? Um, so
So that's kind of where I have been at recently, is just a lot of all the fun things.
it seems like you have several very full plates.
Yeah. I'm trying to balance them right now. I'm kind of reassessing, like how much can I actually do in my time.
So I guess my first question is, since you've been doing this at conventions for a while, you said, have you been able to, I guess, see the way it affects the way that people role play, or have people given you feedback afterwards and said, this totally changes the way I approach things, or anything like that?
Yeah, I've gotten really great feedback from people. The thing about playing it at conventions is that I don't necessarily know what peeps are going to do with it after. I'm just like, and go forth and game now. I always try to teach, if I can, kind of like very early in the convention, so people can kind of think about what we did. But everybody takes away something different that is new to them that they want to try. Oh no, where did Renee go?
Renee,
she's gone ninja. She's ninja form.
I don't know.
whoop,
Uh-oh.
wait,
Oh no.
we appear to be having some technical wait.
It's okay. Everybody's fine. It's all fine.
Are we?
Like, I have full signal,
Everyone
and
has-
Discord is like red. Barely anything happening.
Discord is occasionally a jerk at times like this.
Good to know.
Um,
That was
So
so
true.
scary.
yeah, it's not great. It's one of the perils of running with a free service because we can't afford a paid one.
No,
But I think we're all
we're all here.
I think
we're all
we're good.
here. Okay.
Cool.
You were in the middle of a sentence, I think, and then we lost
Probably.
someone.
Yes. Well, I was saying that everybody loves it, and I get nothing but praise.
That does
And
sound
it's
right.
changed their lives, and their games are infinitely better thanks to me. And I say no, thanks to you.
Nice.
um, I think everybody takes away something different, and I do teach kind of classes with a slightly different focus depending on what we're working on. If I'm doing kind of just an intro to, hey, you're all role players of various types, we're going to learn how to just like kind of be creative together and make stuff up and work on telling a story together, and so like not pre-script so much, but just like be confident with our ideas. Or if I'm teaching maybe more specifically to GMs, we'll look at like we're going to practice when to find good places to like edit a scene, meaning to end a scene and move somewhere else. And so we'll work on timing, we'll work on balancing plot versus just color and fun descriptions, and we'll talk about different ways that you can make fun descriptions in your narration. We'll practice silly voices to have like kind of quick NPCs in different ways. And then I'll also, if I'm focusing more on LARPing, then we'll do kind of full body, how to carry a character in your body. So instead of silly voices, you kind of more emphasize on like physically, how are you going to kind of make yourself look different and carry yourself different and kind of find a character that way. And we play with using invisible objects if you're doing like a propless kind of black boxy LARP and you don't have props and you want to believably interact with invisible objects. And then we'll play games about like status and winning and losing and managing scenes with lots of people in it. So people kind of just take out what works for them and what their particular gameplay. And there's so much. I mean, what I ended up putting in the book is just such a small selection of all the cool stuff out there that you can do to practice all of these skills. And yeah, I'd love to keep recording them because I still learn stuff. I still take classes when I can, and I'm learning from other improvisers all the time. And so whenever I think of something new, I'm like, oh, that'd be so good for this one gaming thing. So
Yeah. I played some of these a little while back on, I think it was one of Ash's streams,
yeah,
and one of the things you brought up was the fact that like you don't have to do them in a certain order. You don't have to do all of them. You could just pick
Mm-hmm.
the ones that seem like they're be best applicable for your group and do
Mm-hmm.
those. And I really like that it's kind of a buffet more than like a set menu where you can kind of just pick and choose whatever you want.
Yeah, yeah. We kind of organized the whole thing by subject, by skill that you wanted to look at, and so people can just kind of jump around. I give some suggestions, and things are kind of organized in like each chapter. The easier stuff is first, and then things like might be a little bit more challenging, that you might want to be a little bit more warm for, or are maybe heavier in scene work, come a little bit later in each chapter. So it kind of levels that way a bit, but I definitely recommend that people just jump around and again pick what works for them. It's one of the things that I actually love about the book is it's totally not what it looked like originally, which was like a in order lesson plan. And that was originally what I thought I was going to be making, was like a workshop kit, like how to run your own improv for gamers workshop.
Mm.
And at the time when I was teaching them, which I've only recently stopped doing, it was 4 hours.
Wow.
I teach a 4-hour workshop, which is intense and challenging for everyone. And now I'm teaching them in kind of like 2-hour bites, which is still, it's both like a lot of time and not enough time.
Yeah,
But so I really like that the book gives you the ability to just take as much time as you need.
definitely. Zach, I see a thing highlighted on here. Did you have a question you wanted to ask?
I mean, I've been very interested in a lot of things actually, but the you've talked about you've actually covered some of it because you talked about the viewing the stuff in the book as curriculum, sort of for a class moving forward. I are these all uh, pre-existing activities that you're taking and bringing in, or are these things you've modulated to make them fit the space? Like, what was the process for this stuff?
It really depends. Some of the exercises, I mean, I present them all in a gamer light of like, hey friends, you know how we use this one skill in games? Well, you can practice that skill in this fun improv exercise. And so they're all kind of presented that way, of talking specifically about like, here's what we're practicing and when we're doing this exercise. So I'm not trying to give a definitive talk on how to play a game or how to improv. Really trying not to come across as the expert on either of those, because I'm not. But so some of the exercises definitely, the way that they came to me when I first learned them have been modified in a way that was more appropriate for how I was teaching them in this one setting. And some of the exercises come from, some of the masters of like Keith Johnstone and Viola Spolin, and are kind of group games. And others are maybe, I'm not quite sure where exactly they originated from, and are more little activities. And then some are just things that I cobbled together from classes that I took, that I was like, ooh, this is a really cool way of practicing this one thing. I want to see how I can take that and make it work for gamers. So it is a mix, but at this point in like the improv-y world, I don't know how much like original content you could say that there is in terms of exercises.
Yeah.
But what I love is the way that everybody puts a different spin on things. And so I love meeting up improvisers from other parts of the state, other parts of the country, who this exercise has come to them and morphed into something slightly different now. And so that's always really fun to see just all the variations on something, and who knows exactly how it started out.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, it like we said earlier, you've got a lot of stuff going on. Do you have any time in your life currently for playing any kind of games? Is there anything that you're currently video game, card game, tabletop game, anything wise that's got your heart or your mind?
I have a couple of regular um, kind of set game dates with people. I'm in a Shadowrun game that we're playing over Zoom. We're not streaming it. Oh no, Renee disappeared again. I might be next.
I'm here.
Hold on to something very
You're
tightly.
safe. You're totally safe.
I was to say.
Traumatized already.
Yeah, I know now. It's the fear. So so we're playing a Shadowrun game with friends, and we try to meet maybe every 2 or 3 weeks online and play for a couple hours in the evening, and then I have another group of 2 local friends who will come over. We used to be on a pretty heavy like weekly and then every other week schedule, but now things are kind of more up in the air. We finished a very long Blades in the Dark campaign and have been kind of just playing little one-offs since then while we try to figure out if we want to do something heavier. But we recently, last session, we started playing Space Post, which is one of Jason Morningstar's games that just dropped on the Bully Pulpit Drip website.
Mm-hmm.
And we took way too long chewing all the scenery, so we were like, well, clearly we must have more sessions now, because we didn't even finish like what was recommended of like what one could do in an hour and a half, and we were like an hour 3, and we're like, clearly we're going to campaign this game that was not maybe meant to be campaigned, but it is. It's a really fun game, and you rotate who plays what as you play a mail carrier going to different outposts, and then you can also play the spaceship, and you kind of just have different scenes as you like deliver mail to people, and there's like a whole table that you can roll on to see what type of mail it is. It's delightful. So I'm very excited about that right now.
That's kind of really great.
It really
I love that it's not like, what does the dragon drop? How many eyeballs does it have? It's like,
no.
Is this like a manila envelope, or are we talking padded
Yeah,
here?
it's like, what type of, what's the gist behind this message? Is it surprising? Is it foreboding? Is it good news? Is it about family? Is it about money? And so you kind of roll all those things up and then play it out as to what is happening.
That's awesome. That's great. The picture in my head right now is like the Planet Express ship combined with Mr. McFeely from Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
Renee, I think you're
kind
muted.
of like that. Yeah. So that's called Space Post, and it's a Bully Pulpit game. It's out on their kind of subscription website.
I need to write something down for no reason.
SPACE. I always think of it. I think of the Space Ghost. Space Ghost. Whenever I come across it.
Yeah, I was trying to find a way to make like a Space Ghost coast to coast thing, and I just didn't quite get there. Do you have much familiarity with Fiasco?
Yes. Okay. Yes, I do. So much.
Do you feel like that's good for getting someone into more improvisational style of playing games, or does that tend to enforce any kind of bad habits that you've seen or anything like that?
I think Fiasco is a great game to practice various improv skills. Not having a ton of ownership on your character when you're doing character creation, the fact that you make it collaboratively is really cool, and that's definitely a good practice of just being able to build characters together, as opposed to coming to the table with yours and be like, here's mine, like my character is all special, my secret backstory. You put all the secrets out on the table. You know what everybody's secret desires are. And so that's a really good practice of being able to just kind of play a little bit more dangerously with a character and enjoy driving them to, less desirable ends, because it's fun for the story. So it's a great one-shot game because you don't there's no reason for you to protect your character and keep them safe and alive and level up. There's no levels.
Yeah.
So so in those cases, I think it definitely practices really good improv skills. When we first started teaching the workshop, and so there's a couple of people, it's not just me, there are a couple of people on the team that when we first started developing it. One is my dear friend Mia Blankensop, who is one of the first people that I met through improv and is a great friend. And she and I collaborated a lot on what the exercises were going to be, because at the time she had much more teaching experience than I did. So we talked a lot about that. Also Matthew Klein, who is also an improviser and a role play gamer. And he does large scale like learning and development, corporate improv workshops and things like that. And so he had more experience about how to handle like larger groups and do not breakout rooms, but, you know, kind of split people into smaller groups and manage teaching a very large class. And then my some of my other improv-y friends, Jennifer Warner has also like been a co-facilitator sometimes when I needed it. And I've totally forgot the thread now of where I was going with this whole explanation. Because I was so excited sharing everybody's names that I forgot the question.
Renee, you're muted. That's totally fine. Renee.
Uh,
I think
oh
the
no,
mic's
did we lose
muted.
Renee?
Oh no.
No, she's just muted.
Breathe, Renee.
Hello.
I don't remember what her question was either. So.
I think it was something along the lines of...
Is Fiasco good for this? I
Yes.
think.
Okay. Getting back to thank you, Fiasco. So when we first started this, we weren't teaching so much at conventions, but we were doing kind of one-off events at our friendly local gaming store, Endgame, before it closed. Miss it so much. And we would do events there and follow up with a quick game. So it was an all-day kind of event where we would do a couple hours of improv, and then we would have 2 hours set aside to play a game. And we did Fiasco, and then for a little while we also did Archipelago, which is another really great like improv-y relative game. So that was a lot of fun, because then we would, you know, really dive people right in to be like, cool, we just practiced a bunch of things, now we're going to take some of those at least and like play them right now. Mm-hmm. Which again, I don't have to do. I also don't have the time to do as much in cons. I can just teach the workshop, and then people can go back to their favorite games.
Yeah. So Ash in the chat asked if you had any other game recommendations that are good, I guess, or conducive to practicing improv skills.
So many. And now I'm so sad that I don't have like a book within reach, because there's a whole like recommended chapter in the back of games that are not necessarily like about, you know, as improv-y forward, but they're just good games for collaborative role play. So Archipelago, as I said, is a really good one. You have a deck of resolution cards, and they scale in the order of yes and, yes but, no but, and no and. So it's like how any time that anybody is declaring that they're going to do something, somebody else at the table can say, that might not be so easy. And that's the resolution mechanic. You flip over the card and then you say how it went.
Oh.
So that is super fun.
I like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about like any others. I don't know. Any game is an improv game if you're not like reading a script.
I mean, sometimes reading a script can turn into an improv game too.
Yeah,
Depending
exactly.
on the people you have around the table.
Mm-hmm. There's a GM that whose games I really love playing whenever he's in town at conventions. His name is Todd Furler, and I really like his games. And for a couple reasons. One, he puts in a ton of work into his games, and he'll kind of create a whole scenario, and he'll run that, maybe like for the year at every convention that he goes to. So he has a set sandbox scenario, but they are delightfully rich. His characters are so fun. You have this wonderful backstory that's like written in the first person, and you're reading it and you're just like, this is funny and informative and like gives me so much to work with. And he talks about, as his GMing style for a lot of these games, he often runs Hollow Earth or Unknown Armies are kind of like the two that I've often seen him run. And he will set up a scene and kind of say, where you are and what's going on, and may even kind of guide, like, this is going to be a scene where the two of you talk about this one thing, and then lets you go. So he like builds up all of this backstory and like kind of gives you the prompt, and then you go to the role play. And I love it because it's just the most like gently well guided, very seamless GMing that is so much more GMing than I would ever do. It's so much work. He puts in so much work in it, and it works so well.
Well, I think that can be really helpful because a lot of times people feel very intimidated by make a character, get in the story.
Yeah.
And, for some people that comes fairly naturally, but other people kind of need that scaffolding.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
help them figure out, oh, so this is how I can give my character a backstory, and this is what this looks like. And so they don't feel like they have to build so much as take something they're given and create with that.
Oh, exactly. And that's so much of what makes good improv is just listening to what's there and working with that. And you're going to be creative, and you're going to be funny if you're trying to be funny. These things are going to happen. But the really great scenes that I see in improv, they often don't have like a ton of new wild wacky stuff. They're very focused, and it's because the improvisers are really listening to each other and just using what they've heard so far and building tiny piece by tiny piece. So absolutely, I'm all for scaffolding, and I think that people can be more creative within restraints, and we're like, here's the world. You wake up in the morning. What do you do? And you're like, I don't even know what I'm responding to. Should I tell you that I had breakfast? Like, what?
I brushed my teeth.
Yeah. Do I really talk you through my whole morning routine? Like, I have a lot of face creams. Like, we could be here a while. Serums, you got to layer them. Like,
right.
So absolutely. So I think going back to just like other games that are good for improv-y stuff, I love all of the games that have come off of Powered by the Apocalypse that have some type of relationship mechanic. And there are other games that do this too, like Smallville. You make like a whole relationship web. And GMs all the time have different techniques of tying people together and making those links across the table. But I like that because I like the relationship mechanic that says, like, why do you care about this person? And care could be, I hate them. Like, care doesn't mean I think tenderly of them, but it's like, why are you so invested? How invested are you in this person succeeding or failing? And that that's a motivation to interact with this other character. And so games that just kind of start off with like, well, y'all met in a tavern, you've all been hired for this one job. I think and none of you know each other, and you're like, well, bummer, because now we have to play through the getting to know each other when we could already get to we're all salty and like know each other far too well.
Yeah, we don't want to play through the awkward introductory part.
Yeah, we want to get there.
So, a couple things just when I was thinking of it. We played For the Queen for a couple months on here, and I feel like that one's really good just because
For the Queen's great.
It's entirely prompts, and we we did a play and learn of it at PAX South this year,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing people's faces light up. It was a group of like 8 or 10 people at a table who had never met before. And
Mm-hmm.
it started off, everybody's very reserved. And by the end, there's a guy like slamming a card down on the table and he goes, "You said you'd never met the queen before we went on this trip, but all of a sudden there's this information? Which one's real?" And I'm just like,
It was so
"Give
great.
this to me. It's beautiful."
For the Queen is so wonderful and such an elegant game, and I'm just so excited that it like appeared and then immediately just like was already fully formed, and became a game and is out and is a thing so quickly. You just never see that, and I love that you don't know who your characters are going in. It's such an interesting game because you're very comfortable with knowing so little. Like you don't know who your characters are. You may never actually name them. You just might kind of know them by their position, and you might not
Yeah.
figure that out until like the third or fourth round. So
Right.
talking about, a lot about improv is being comfortable, maybe being slightly uncomfortable, or being okay in states of where you don't know everything. You're, as a performer, you're getting on stage, you're like, I have no idea what's going to happen, but like you accept that and you're like, cool, this is going to be fun. And so that's kind of that same feeling, is like you start that game and you have no idea where it's going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and two of the things that I particularly like about it are that it kind of walks you through.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one person may answer a question and have a lot of backstory for it, but another person might only answer the question with the information they come up with right then,
Mm-hmm.
just for that question, and it still works.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I really like about it goes back to what you said about character relationships and caring about other characters, is that there are specifically questions that ask players what they dislike about the queen, or
Mm-hmm.
beef that they have, or it does bring up that you don't have to be in this group because you have a positive relationship with someone. You may be in this group because you have a negative relationship with someone,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really interesting to explore.
Yeah. I love the one line that, is in the setup of the few things that you do know, is that the queen chose you because she knows that you love her. And I have not seen a majority of those relationships that are actually like all that great. Like,
Yeah.
Like,
they're complicated. Everyone has
Yes.
really complicated relationships, and some people might be 100% loyal, and some people are have really messed up feelings with this queen and have like really weird relationships. And I like that, because you have to keep going back to, but why
right.
do I love the queen?
Yeah. Or at some point it becomes, why did I love her and why don't I
Yeah,
anymore?
Right. What happened to
exactly.
change that?
Yeah, so that's all about justifying, which is a huge improv skill of explaining why a thing is true. You give people an offer, which is your idea,
Yeah.
and they, the yes and is like accepting that, cool, that is a fact now in our world, that is true, and I'm going to like justify that and explain why that's true and weave it into like the reality that we're in. So that's so that game is all about justifying why these facts are true.
Right. And another thing, like you were talking earlier about, kind of the standard form of RPG intro where it's like you meet in a tavern, nobody knows each other, that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. Um, I wanted to call out a thing one of the people on our podcast did, and we started a Blades campaign. I had no idea what we were doing. And the first session, he started us off with 4 questions, and he like sat back and watched everybody kind of set their own stakes, which I feel like not a lot of GMs are willing to let people do, is like really buy into stuff to kind of help give you something to go off of. But
Mm-hmm.
it started off, it was like, okay, so where are you? Um, how long has that alarm been going off? Whose fault is it? And like, what were
Mm.
you there to steal? And it lets you kind of cement everything immediately. You don't have to worry about the awkward intro, and you just hit the ground running. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that kind of stuff. Geez, excuse me, hiccups. I did have a question for you. You've mentioned the yes and
Mhm.
a bunch, and I think if you ever all the people I've talked to about improv who didn't have a background in it, that's kind of one of the only things they know about it. Does that kind of going in with that being the only thing you know, do you think that kind of skews anything to where people feel like they have to agree with what everybody else said, or it kind of sets some bad habits in people's minds to start with?
I'm super glad you brought that up. So here's my rant about yes and, which I give frequently when I teach, and because if people just hear that and they're like, oh, an improv rule is yes and you need to say yes to things. Like, I have so many problems that we can unpack that we don't have to unpack that deeply about the sentence, you have to say yes to things. Like, that is a problem. Because you don't, and not every idea is going to be a great idea if it's not made in good faith by people that you trust.
Yeah.
So, like, when you're in a troupe with somebody, you meet with those people all the time. You work with them. You get to know their style and the characters that they like to play, the characters they tend to play, the way that their plots tend to go. You really get to know them, and so you get a feeling for the types of situations that they'll be comfortable in, and where is the line when you know that they would not be comfortable. And a very common thing that people do starting out, and everybody does it, and it's just part of the learning curve of improv, is you get a little bit too excited of like anything goes, and suddenly you're just making ridiculous offers that are putting people in kind of unsafe positions, or just the content is like horribly inappropriate, because you just got a little too excited about this whole like freedom of creativity, and it just goes the wrong way. So that can happen, and then also people can not be acting in good faith, and take advantage of that and feel like they can abuse that rule of like, haha, I know particularly, or I think it would be funny anyways, to put you in a scene in this type of content, and you have to do it, ha 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 ha. And you're like, why would you? No, that's awful. Who
Yeah.
wants to play with that person again? So in order to really have like the yes and mindset, you need to be like totally comfortable, or have a good sense of the barrier, of what the framework is, of like of the buy-in of, here's the genre that we're playing, here's the tone that we're playing, here's our maturity level that we're doing. And all of those things are super important to do in like your session 0 anyways.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, then you're going to have people either just because they didn't know, introducing content that's not super fun, or because they don't care and aren't acting in good faith. And I mean, the great thing about games is we have all these wonderful calibration tools that we can talk about, like, actually, I'm not comfortable with that content, can we renegotiate that content? Like, no,
Right.
hang on, we're not going to do that content at all. That is not something that you can necessarily do when performing on a stage. However, I have actually seen more improvisers just straight up say no sometimes recently, which I find amazing, because it's also with their own troupe members.
Right.
And I think I was in a scene, or sorry, I was watching a scene of a show of this hilarious troupe, and one person who again had been just like super cool all night started kind of laying the groundwork for like this little racist punchline that like the whole audience kind of saw, like he gave the setup to his scene partner, and his scene partner said, we are not doing that. And they just kept the scene and kept going, and I was like, that is amazing. You just totally said no on stage. How wonderful.
If there's ever a time to say no, it's to shitty racist jokes.
Mhm.
Right?
Right?
I'm
Yeah.
not going to let you make me a part of this.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it was no, we're just not going to do that. And I thought that was so wonderful to see, because I had never seen that before. So yes, I think that yes, and if not really unpacked and practiced, and if it doesn't come along with this idea of like, but you have to trust each other and you have to honor each other's boundaries and like you have to know each other and just like generally be cool people, it's not enough on its own to stand up as like a good guideline for how to play, because it can be misunderstood or abused.
I have a quick follow up on, well, maybe not quick, but I have a follow up on that as a total layman, outsider to improv. Whatsoever. My understanding and where I'm coming from is I was a teacher, and I know that to me the yes and thing, whether it's games or whatever you're doing, if I were to ask a question of the class in a class, and a child was to give me the wrong answer, I was like, wrong, 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 wrong. That child would never engage again.
Yeah.
Never. No, so, to me, in my head at least, my interpretation has always been the yes and is don't hard stop no the one thing that's wrong. If
Yeah.
it's not wrong in bad faith, or it's not wrong it inside its own context, if it's just like a wrong thing or a thing that doesn't quite work, do your best to roll with it as well as you can to
Mhm.
keep them engaged.
Yeah, it's like having the attitude of you want to say yes, you're excited for their idea, you want to figure out how to make it work, because the and justification of making that work and then adding more things to it. So some people like to say that it's not yes and, but like yes add, or it's not
Mhm.
say yes,
Yeah.
but like consider yes, be open to yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in actually, this kind of what I was thinking in my professional development last summer. The instructor was talking about how in her class discussions, that's where she goes. Like, if one student makes a point, the next student can't be like, well, I disagree with you. You have to start with acknowledgement of what they said and where they're coming
Mhm.
from, which is the yes part, and then add, which could be an addition I agree with, or I saw it this way when they said, when the
Mhm.
text said this. And so kind
Mhm.
of acknowledging where you're coming from and then maybe taking it a different direction, because it's either not going to work, or you just you can't go the direction that they're going with it,
Mhm. Yeah.
outside of to totally unsafe things, obviously, which at
Yes.
that
Yeah.
point you're just like, nope.
Yeah, the yes is definitely also a way of saying I acknowledge you, and in order to like acknowledge that idea, you have to have listened to it so you can kind of repeat back to it and get it right. And so, yeah, you can teach a whole class in just how to practice saying yes, which is just you're practicing active listening.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think that when I first saw the book and the fact that this was a thing that had been done, and that this is the whole improv for gamers thing was a thing.
Yeah.
The first thing that my brain went to was that like early D&D DM that everyone has that tells you no, you can't do this thing, no, you can't do this thing, no, you can't.
Yeah.
And how that like mentally scars so many of us so long until we can
Mhm.
find
Oh
people
yeah.
that can play with us outside of those boundaries, whether it's
Oh
in
yeah.
D&D or a different game,
Mhm.
right?
For
So
sure.
like, and this is props to Erin, because I'm sure that she has this in the back of her head all the time when she improvs games. But when she DMs games, so when I was it the first campaign that we did, the 4E campaign?
The first episode of the first
Oh yeah.
campaign we did, yes.
So we had this whole like tournament thing, and the big bad was in the stands. Of course, we didn't know it was the big bad for the whole story, and he was flying away on an eagle, and one of the players was like, "So can I like just shoot that eagle?" And Aaron pauses. Yeah, I guess you can. And then we killed him, and it turned out he was meant to escape, and we were supposed to track him down later.
Right.
And Aaron had to do her whole story.
That's when I realized
Yeah.
that writing the campaign ahead of time is bullshit when I threw that binder away.
I've
thing that
done
I
that
really-
too. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've
just
done the
have
other
always
where I've
appreciated that. You know, that like instead of saying no, the eagle flew so fast, it was like, yeah, let's see where this goes, and it turned out really great for all of us as players.
Yeah, I had to learn that too because when I first started GMing, I was very railroady and did not do that great. Because I was like, well, I made this story and I'm supposed to lead people through this story, and they want to do something different, and I don't know how to respond to that. It's interesting. I feel a lot of for a lot of the conversations about improv in gaming, it's just for the GM of being an improv GM, which means that you maybe made a framework and you're ready to like roll with things. But you might, you have cheat sheets, maybe, like different levels of what your improv GMing is. But like for me, I didn't think of it that way. Like I immediately thought of like, players getting along, not fighting for the spotlight, like not just like being so focused on their own characters winning. And that was for me a lot of the motivation for wanting to bring more improv into gaming was the player experience. Because it's a totally different it's not a totally different skill, but it rounds out like a completely other section of what improv is all about, if depending on like what side of the table you're on.
Yeah. Do you feel that I guess the RPGs and stuff coming out now tend to be a little bit more like improv friendly? Because I know a lot of people's first experience is D&D, and it seems like a lot of that is the DM has written a novel and you are a character and you have a very small piece you can move. Whereas I feel like with like Dungeon World and stuff, it specifically tells you to leave blank spots and let people fill them in as they go and stuff like that. Do you find that there's more games doing that, or is it still kind of varying a little bit?
I mean, for as much as I talk a big game about gaming, I don't know all and everything that's out there, even though I do work on a lot that comes through Evil Hat. I think there are definitely a lot of games that tell you to leave space, which is great. I'm also still very surprised when I meet people who have like just recently gotten into the hobby and all they know about is D&D, and I'm still like confused about like how is that? How did you start with that one? No.
Yeah. Where did you
Like it
find the
doesn't
black
seem
and
like a
white
good
TV in this day
entryway.
and age?
It's hard.
Well, and I think a lot of it is name recognition, but for me, like the students that I have that have gotten into RPGs, it's definitely because, and here we come, I'm going to make everybody feel old. Their parents grew up playing D&D, and so that's what they have access to, and that's what they immediately recognize. Although my students play 5e mostly, so like they're getting the newest edition, but I think they're picking it up because that's what their parents know.
They learned it from you, Dad.
I learned it from watching you.
I have 4 students right now who definitely have their dad's sets of Magic the Gathering cards. I'm like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
I found a D20 under your bed. You want to explain what the hell's going on here?
Yeah, I mean there are just so many games, and people are making games all the time. So many wonderful little Patreon like mini games that are just like a little experience that you can play, that are much more improv-y.
Yeah.
There's so much good stuff out there, and I'm always excited to just like see the hobby continue to grow.
I've found that for like the 200-word RPG thing they do every year, since you're so constrained by the space you've got, there is so much blank space for people to just work with, and it's like, okay, well, I have 3 rules written down and the names of 4 characters. We can do literally anything with this. Let's go nuts. And I liked there's a lot of choices. Excuse me for people.
Mhm. Yeah, there's something about having so little that you can do so much with in terms of how you want to interpret it.
Yeah.
The opposite of which is having this huge, wide, intricately detailed world, um, but it follows a very strict set of rules of what is and isn't because it's all canon.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, there seem to be pluses and minuses for the whole sliding scale of structure under structure for
Mm-hmm.
the game, right? If the more structure you have, the easier it is to bounce forward off of that to make something cool. But the less
Mm-hmm.
structure you have, the easier it is to sort of make it your own thing and collaborate going forward. So I like that there are multiple options. Like I like that Burning Wheel exists and that like Dungeon
Mm-hmm.
World also exists. And
Yeah.
you can do reasonably similar things with the two of them.
Yeah, and I mean, I play a variety of games. The group that I'm playing Shadowrun with right now, we played like a 3-year Pathfinder campaign. That was a ton of fun, and that was a game where I was definitely like very like I must keep my character alive.
Mm-hmm.
So was protective in some ways that I would not be if I were playing Fiasco, where I'm just like big explosion. Who knows what happens? They fall out of the hot air balloon.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, the character. I was actually having this conversation with my wife, who got into D&D during fourth edition, like after we both graduated from college and moved away.
Mm-hmm.
But so she came to it very late, and she definitely had like that must survive, make the right decisions, be
Mm-hmm.
and because that was what the game, that's what D&D makes you do. Like that's
Yeah.
the mentality that D&D attempts to instill in you. Is like you're going to get better. You just have to live to do it. So keep living.
Mm-hmm.
When I was describing to her Fiasco actually, and I'm like, you just drive them like you stole them. It's like
Right.
Mm-hmm.
you don't actually care if this character survives at the end.
They
You
won't.
want it to be fun along the way.
Yeah, I mean, you care about the character and you want them to have a good story. And I still get, precious some, with characters that I get really attached to because they're fun, and you're like, oh, I want to keep telling stories with that same character. So,
Yeah.
but sometimes not every story is going to be 6 seasons in a movie. Sometimes they just don't have the legs, and it's just going to be a short little story for that character.
It's a 4-episode miniseries, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So going back to the book, did you have was there like a specific catalyzing moment that made you decide I have to write this, or were you like looking back and been like, man, I wish I had known these 43 things, way back when I started, or what was like the driving thing behind writing it?
Well, I know the driving moment in starting the workshops where I was in a game at like a little kind of mini convention, and there was somebody at the table who was just playing a different game.
Mm.
There were like, I think there were 4 or 5 of us as players, and they kind of set up their own NPCs that they cared about and barely interacted with the rest of us at all. And it was kind of whenever it came around to them, it was just them and the GM and their story. And the rest of us are like on an adventure together or figuring things out or having messy relationships. We kept trying to draw this person in, and they just like really weren't interested in that. They were playing their own game, and that was very frustrating because I was like, collaborative role play, like
Oh,
we're supposed to be
no.
telling a story together.
I think that would kill me.
It was frustrating, and so that for me was like I had kept talking about improv and gaming, and I was like, fine, I'm going to teach it since no one else will. I'll do it myself. And I go get my Infinity Gauntlet and go do improv.
I'll make them pay.
Yeah, I'll make them all pay. And the book came out of just having all of these notes but also realizing, I just want more and more people to actually try out improv and not just hear about it on podcasts or read about it and then see how they can apply those theories, but actually try the improv in an improv class. and kind of, because I'm a very kinesthetic learner, so it's like I really want people to actually just like live through what improv is, and then try to apply it to their games.
Absolutely.
And the book came out of just wanting it to be more accessible. Improv classes can be pricey. Conventions are pricey. You know, the hobby can be very expensive, and the book is $20, and you can repeat it all you want. So I was very just excited about trying to get something out to a wider audience, who were also maybe not down with the idea of taking a class, because that also, you know, improv is scary, and taking a class can be intimidating, and if it's not with people you know, that's really scary.
Yeah. Putting
That's a
yourself out
tough.
there in front of a giant group is some people's version of hell, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a tough engagement threshold to get over for a lot
Yeah.
of folks. Yeah, for sure.
It is.
For
It is
sure.
for sure. So all of that kind of went into the book of me just trying to get this message out to people, that so they knew how they could practice improv.
Yeah. So I know, you know, you compiled all of these different exercises together. Do you have like 4 or 5 that are your just absolute favorite that you, whenever you're showing the book off, you always try to bust out these specific ones, or does it tend to vary? Again, you know, depending on the group that's playing it.
It does. I think it does vary, but there are ones that I always really really enjoy. I think one of the standbys that I love doing of just kind of brainstorming and getting people to kind of think a little bit more quickly is Three Things, which is a category game. And I used to actually use it to quiz students when I taught ESL. We would use it to practice vocabulary and kind of like pop quiz each other. And so
I
that's a
remember
really
Three
fun,
Things.
yeah. So that's a really fun game about just like making stuff up, and it doesn't matter what your answers are to this question, because we're all gonna yell after and like celebrate that you answered the question. Oh yeah, there's a dog. So it's great because it's like you did the thing. It's not you did it right or you did it well or you did it funny, but you did it.
You made it through. Congrats.
Yeah. So it's a very celebratory game. I absolutely love Animal Secrets, which I had tried to track down where this game came from, because nobody I had ever met had heard of it. But there actually is. When it came to me, I've seen other people play it as just secrets, but they play like object secrets. But Animal Secrets is you all pick an animal and then tell silly secrets as if you were that type of animal, and it's so weird, and sometimes can get kind of like sad because people then start telling like, I mean, none of these are real secrets, but it's like if you picked, you know, koala, and you're like telling secrets that a koala might tell, they could be really funny, you know, like I don't like bamboo, or it could be something that you know, is like if you were an anthropomorphic koala, would be like really sad, of like, I've been cheating on my partner for 7 years. I tell them I'm working late and I'm not working late. And so I love that game because it's silly and everyone gets really sad. And and it, you know, the lesson behind it that we then talk about is having characters that are vulnerable, and also telling secrets, so you have player knowledge versus character knowledge. And so I like that. I like any game. I love any game that requires people to all yell something at the same time and also have a coordinated hand gesture. So those two both have that, because at the end of the Three Things, everyone yells three things, and in Animal Secrets, everybody says secrets, and like this thing. So I love any games that have that because it's so weird and fun. So my dog is like tearing apart a toy behind me. I can just hear him.
Such is the state of dogs.
It's fine.
Yeah,
It's
right.
fine.
There's a game that's not in the book that I love, and I love now, and I kind of learned it when just right after the cutoff point of like, you know, we're done writing it now. We can't we can't add more.
Can't keep adding things.
Yeah, and it's all about justifying how to solve a crisis. And I love it because it teaches about justification and also just saying things really boldly and also coming up with creative solutions to weird problems. So that one you can play it in pairs, and each person will say a problem that they have and then an unrelated object. So like, there's a snake in my boot and all I have is this orange, or I missed my bus and all I have is this like old broken TV. And then you have to solve each other's problems with your object. So you're like, cool. Well, if you take this orange and you throw it just right into the tailpipe of the bus, then the bus will break down and it'll have to stop and you can catch up with it. You're like, sweet. If you take the antenna off of this old TV, you can stab into your boot with it and kill the snake. Awesome. Crisis solved. And that's it. Like, it's just this little exchange that you have of creatively making up solutions to problems. And a lot of times you're like, well, this orange is magic. And you're like, yeah, okay, cool, yes. I accept that is true. It is. It's true because you said it's true. And so we're going to roll with that. And so it gives people like kind of the freedom to establish that maybe physics work a little differently in this world. You know, maybe we're not all we don't have all the knowledge that our characters might have, and we don't exactly know how all the things in the world work, and we're not all super hackers. So we're just going to kind of say that this is how it works.
Yeah.
You know, and we could still roll and see if we're successful or not, but then we've established that, like, okay, in this world, you know, we're all really good at throwing oranges at buses.
It's an innate human ability here.
It is, yeah.
Evolutionary fluke.
I think we're starting to get close to our hour or so. Maybe we could do a couple more questions and then, and then a hiccup.
Yeah.
So you touched on this a little bit earlier when you talked about your first improv game, that you enjoyed using it in your ESL classes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, as a high school English teacher, how does your experience teaching English as a second language, and I Googled you, and I'm very curious about an applied linguistics degree, like that just sparked my brain. But I'm curious as to how that informed the way that you teach improv and the way that you decided what improv things to use to include in your book, that kind of thing.
So applied linguistics, it was my master's degree, and we, it was the study of how people learn language. And then the different theories that people have had on how we learn language, and then theories on how best to teach language. So it was great as I was teaching ESL to have that and just look at the different ways that, like, theories of pedagogy have evolved as we learn more things, or just as new ideas become popular in terms of teaching. In terms of like my teaching style as an improv teacher, I really like setting people up to discover themselves and kind of lead them to have their own aha moments and kind of take what works for them. Uh-huh. So again, I'll do a brief setup of like kind of the same as in the book, is I'll say, okay, we're going to practice this exercise, and it's specifically going to practice these skills, and these skills might come up in your games in this way or another way. Here's how you play the game. We're going to play the game. Cool. Now let's debrief. And I'll kind of just keep asking them questions about, like, what was really challenging for you? What was your favorite part about that? What was something that, but also just I really encourage people to just be really nice to each other. So I'm like, what's something that someone else did that was really funny that you really appreciated? So try to get them to give a lot of positive feedback to each other as well. But also just leave a lot of space for people to come in with their own thoughts about about what they experienced. And so sometimes you also ask of like, how did you know that you were winning that game? Like what were the parameters that we defined that you felt like you were doing that well, and what did that look like to you? And so asking those types of questions, just a little different than teaching ESL, because you are trying to guide them through a certain amount of right answers of how the English language works. But a lot of
works.
yeah, works. But still, there's a lot of the I think when I was teaching ESL, I was doing more of the test, teach, test model. Of you say, okay, I'm going to give you guys an exercise. I'm going to give you all an exercise, and just do your best. And would kind of briefly explain it to them, but not necessarily tell them what the grammar was or what the vocabulary was that they were doing. So we might do something like, on a low level, like vocab. Okay, we're going to brainstorm all the animals we could see in a zoo. You have 3 minutes to write down as many as possible. And then, and then we would take all of those, we'd write them all up on the board and categorize them and be like, cool, what are these different types of animals? And if somebody didn't know an animal that someone else has said, then they had to explain it to them. And so kind of getting them to teach each other and share all of their knowledge. And then I might come in with the lesson and be like, all right, these are all, different types of animals. And here's another cool thing that will, these are different body part words if we're going to talk about the anatomy of animals. Great. Now I'm going to, give you some other type of group activity of practicing all of this vocabulary. So you test them first to kind of engage them and see what their level is, and then show them what it is that you're going to practice. And now that they're warmed up, you go practice it again, which is a little different than how I do improv, because I'm not trying to quiz anybody on their improv at all. I like teaching applied improvisation, meaning like not so much for performers, but just for regular folk who want to practice public speaking and active listening and collaboration. And you can practice those same skills just like gamers can practice our skills through these like fun theater games. And so I like teaching those classes the same as I like teaching improv for gamers classes, because I don't want anybody to feel pressured to actually be a good performer. Like, that's not the focus of this class. We're doing a skill class on like practicing and isolating like these little muscles at a time that we're just going to practice. And like, nobody's getting up on stage, nobody's trying to be funny. I'm not judging you on how clever you're being right now. Like, don't do that. Don't try to be clever. Because it'll happen, on its own, organically. So that's a little different. But taking improv definitely helped me as a teacher of like, oh no, the computer doesn't work anymore. Cool, I can definitely...
Right, like, oh wait, the internet's down. Well, there's my whole lesson plan.
Yeah. Oh, we spent all week learning the vocabulary for a movie and now it won't stream. Cool. I can do this. Have again that confidence of being in a place of uncertainty was very helpful for me.
Well, that makes sense, because improv seems like the type of thing, in a learning arena, it's very much about figuring yourself out and your own vulnerabilities, and then growing that, very much. So.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Zach, Renee, you got any no questions? Damn it.
I mean, I have a number, but I don't want to slow things down. I am very curious, and this is not related to things we've been talking about so far. What is it like editing role-playing game books? Because I know some of those are very singular objects usually. Some of them have a very deep voicing to them that is probably an obstacle. I'm just really curious what that experience is like from your perspective.
It's very fun, first of all, because it's always exciting and engaging material. I am kind of picky about this when I come into the process. is I expect the books to be pretty done mechanically. So I'm not necessarily giving rules advice. Any developmental work that I'm doing is more in like shaping the structure of it, or shaping the fiction sides of things and the descriptions of it, and like how well they're explaining the rules. So it's very exciting to be part of the creation process. But it does mean that I read a lot of games that aren't that great to read in that moment. And a lot of my reading, I'm not reading a lot of polished stuff. Like I actually had a break between projects a week or two ago, and I read a book, an actual book, a book that was done, and was not a game. And I was like, this is amazing.
Look at the way these words do the
Because
thing.
editing books is also editing games is so finicky because we have so many terms. So it's like, what is capitalized, what isn't capitalized, what's hyphenated, what are we going to put in like a special font, and every book is different. And so you make a lot of very detailed style guide lists of hundreds of words that you are going to spell a certain way. Is role playing one word or two words or hyphenated? Like, is game master two words? Is it capitalized? And different people do it differently. Like, so there's kind of figuring out what's true for this book. what are the rules of engagement for this one that we're going to go with and try to apply? So it's very finicky, and you get really bogged down in the structure of words, which I enjoy doing, but I read very slowly and carefully, and it can take me, an hour to read maybe 20 pages, and then it's very time consuming, and by the end of it, having read a book on like its 7th or 8th round, you're kind of like, if I see like one more, like I thought we changed that phrase, you just get a little not. I need a break then from playing it. Like, I like playing it while I'm working on it, but then I normally need a break for a little bit from this game, because I was like, I have looked far too deep into the soul of this paper and ink. And I can't do it again. Also, I'm very superstitious that if I open a book once it's finished, I'll find the typo.
Oh.
I have so much anxiety.
It was put there
I feel
specifically
So much
for
anxiety
you.
looking at them when they're done, because I'm so terrified I'm going to find a typo.
Yeah.
Please send any corrections to.
Yeah. So if y'all find a typo in what have I been working on lately? If you find a typo in Blaze in the Dark, or For the Queen, or Scum and Villainy,
I'll make
please
sure
don't
to
tell me.
circle it, take a screenshot,
Do not.
send it to you.
Just don't. Never tell me. Never tell me. Just find me on Twitter and just ping me and say this book was great.
There you go.
Immaculate. This book was immaculate.
Yes, if you could. I think one of the best pieces of feedback I ever had on a game was this game called War of Ashes, which was a lovely evil hat game that mixes Fate Accelerated and minis, and the setting is so cool and weird and fun, and it just didn't get like the attention that I feel like this book deserves. So War of Ashes, you should go find this book. And a friend of mine read it, and he is actually the type of guy who will like buy games and just sit down and like read page 1 to page 330. I'm like, cool. And he said, he was like, all of the page references were correct. And there were a lot of page references.
Listen, as somebody who played a lot of White Wolf back in the day, like
Yeah.
X is a bugaboo of mine. So that's not nothing.
It's not nothing. Yeah, when he was like, what a wonderfully referenced book. I could find everything. I was like, oh my God, thank you.
Your beautifully functional book. I love it.
Yeah, that's all I want to hear.
It opens and the words are good. You did great.
It opens and the words are there, and the words are in the right order.
It's what more can you ask for?
I don't know.
Um, well, first off, I want to thank you so much for making the time to come hang out with us today,
Absolutely.
and preemptively thank you for coming to hang out with us Thursday. For those of you in the chat, we are doing the activities part. We're actually opening our textbooks and doing some activities. Maybe we can do animal secrets. See?
Oh, for sure. Some of my other favorite games involve not singing, well, yeah, but like chanting. It's a little harder to do on stream,
There's one
but
called
they're really
Start a
fun.
Cult. No.
It's such a fun thing to end a workshop with it's like, y'all didn't think when you came in here that you would be like enthusiastically doing improvised singing at the end, but here we are. And it's such a wonderful achievement
I like that a lot.
to get people to that level.
So, this is your spot. If you want to do any more plugs, tell people where they can find you online, and wrap that whole thing up with a non-capitalist shout out if you want.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so my name is Karen. I'm at K12s on Twitter. You can find more information about Improv for Gamers at improvforgamers.com, or you could find more information just about me at karen12s.com. I have too many gigs, so I have separate websites for various gigs. That's not even all of them. And a non-capitalist shout out. It's so funny whenever people ask me, like, what are you thankful for? I just think my dog. Like, shout out to my dog.
Dogs is a great shout out.
Yeah.
Shout out to pets. I had really wanted to get another dog. I grew up with dogs, and it had been a very long time before I was in a financial place to get a dog and have an apartment that would allow dogs. And this dog is very cute. Let me grab him. He's right here.
What
I know.
perfect timing.
There you.
This dog is a great prop.
Yeah, no, excellent. Well trained. Well
Oh,
trained
there
in
he
the
is.
stream. Hi! Hi, Puppy.
This is Emmett.
Look at that dog. Oh, man.
I lost my earbud. This
I
is
don't know.
Emmett. When Emmett gets tired, I say he gets very floppy. Because when he's super sleepy late at night, it's the only time that I can hold him on my chest like a baby. And he's like too sleepy to care, and he just like flops his head down, and he'll look up and be like, "What's going on?" So this is Emmett.
That's awesome. I don't know if you were looking at the questions list, but one of the questions about halfway down is how good a boy is Emmett.
Yeah, he's a very good boy. He's very sweet.
I mean,
And all he wants to do is just like sit in your lap and nap.
Hi, Emmett.
Yeah.
Keep together, it's fine. Zach, where can people find you, and do you have a shout out?
I'm at Thrognar on Twitter. That's basically it. I'm also at there's some other places, but that's the primary one. Non-capitalist shout out. I'm finding sunlight to be an amazing thing now because it's back, y'all, and I needed it in a really bad way. It turned out. So
I know that this camera is very blue, so I do have an extremely pale tint, but I also am very pale and don't go out in the sun much for skin reasons. But walking and like getting the sun on my back is a delightful feeling. You're just like, oh, so good.
Yeah, I'm west of or east of Canada up here, so like we just exited winter and are sort of in spring. And it feels like it's been like 6 months because it has.
Oh god, it's already like a billion degrees here.
Yeah, it was 90 here the other day with like 90%
there was a nice
humidity.
breeze though.
It's supposed to get to 65 tomorrow, and I am pumped.
Bay Area is kind of off and on, not very hot.
Renee, where can people find you?
Me, I'm Night Stalker on Twitter with numbers because I was that kind of person when I made it. But if you find that D&D podcast, you can easily find me.
She retweets
Um,
all the things.
yes. I always strongly encourage everyone to patronize their local libraries. There's
Mhm.
lots of fun things there.
That's very good. Phew. Okay, I'm gonna start with mine and then go to the podcast stuff. If you want to find me anywhere, you can look for me on Twitter at the road virus underscore. If you want to find me on Twitch, it's the underscore road underscore virus. It's not it's a whole thing.
Eh,
Um, if you want to find the podcast, we are on Patreon, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and I don't know, probably Instagram at some point, at that D&D podcast with the letter N and not an ampersand. And my non-capitalist shout out of the day is take your camera, take a picture of yourself, and regardless of how you feel that day, find at least one nice thing to say out loud about yourself.
that's a good one.
So yes, stay tuned. Well, not stay tuned. Tune in Thursday, same
Yeah.
time as we get together again for some in-depth shenaniganry. And
Fun.
until then, good
Look
night,
forward
y'all.
to it.
Night, Internet.